Okay, great. Without further ado, I want to get on to Audrey's wonderful presentation. So this is Audrey Jaber. I think many of you know her. If you don't, you should know her. She's just wonderful. She's a brilliant musician. She's a fantastic coworker with a brilliant mind. She is the membership coordinator for the Country Dance and Song Society. So we're very lucky to get to work with her on a daily basis. But she also recently completed her master's in, let me get this right, transcultural and traditional music studies. Yes. At the University of Sheffield. So she is sharing her thesis with us today. And without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Audrey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Good evening. I am, in fact, Audrey Lee Jaber, in case that didn't come clear with Katie. And I am just so excited to be here this evening and to share with you the work that I've put in the past couple of years. And I am now officially a graduate of the University of Sheffield in England. And I'm going to get used to my bobblehead here in the presentation. I might have a little too much fun with it over here. So hi, everybody. I'm in the corner. Before we get started, I wanted to quickly thank CDSS and all the folks who helped me with this project and everyone's extremely kind words of encouragement throughout the years with this project. I can't cover all 20,000 words with you today on my dissertation, so I'm hoping to share some highlights that I hope you find interesting or at least keep you awake. Let's start with what might seem the obvious. What is English country dance? A deceptively easy question. Like anything, the answer depends on who you're asking. How would you define it? You might be familiar with this already, but what I can tell you definitively is that English country dance, as it's practiced today, is, surprise, has its English origins. And it comes from the printed books of the Dancing Master. They were dances collected and published by John Playford originally in 1651 with subsequent editions until 1728. I just want to quickly point out this lovely drawing from a Playford publication with a very naked fiddler in the middle. I promise I wear clothes when I play. After falling out of fashion, ECD was brought to the forefront again by, you guessed it, Englishman Cecil Sharp, who was the leader of the English folk revival of the early 20th century as part of the English national movement around World War I. He came over to the United States starting in 1916 and established the American branch of the English Folk Dance and Song Society, and you guessed it again, is what is now CDSS. And he introduced his reconstructed version of English country dance, where we continue it here in the US today. My main argument, because all papers need arguments, is that innovation, not preservation, has always been a core value to American ECD, especially in its music. I want to point out that this presentation focuses on the music aspect, and I am by no means an expert on the choreography side of modern English country dance, but a friendly reminder that they are in fact very intertwined with each other. The foundation for this paper had started to percolate in my mind way back during the pandemic, when an English musician, oddly enough, primarily a contra dance musician, and friend Gareth Kittier wrote this controversial post on Facebook that I'm wondering if there are folks in here that remember this post. I won't attempt to read this in my terrible English accent, so you'll have to use your imagination while I read this quote. Is English country dance in the US still English at all? Thing is, I can't see the English component representing the country in which I live, although I have nothing but admiration for the dance and tune writers. It looks and feels different to me, like a kind of recreation process. Wouldn't it make sense to rename this genre American country dance? Now, let me tell you, I spent a lot of time reading those spicy comments with some popcorn. It was very entertaining. Just so you know what you're in for tonight, there are three parts of the presentation. Part one provides the historical context. Part two explores the shifting repertoire and standardization in the music. And part three focuses on the musical innovation and how it's played today. Let's get started. All right, let's go back to one more. Oh, there we go. Playford era origins. What do we know about the music? From the very beginning, tunes were intimately tied with a specific dance. The tunes were always provided with the dance in the Playford publications. The repertoire was constantly evolving with every edition being published, incorporating popular tunes of the day. Many tunes came from ballad operas, street songs, and only later did they acquire a dance identity through these publications. It's like if we wrote a dance to Taylor Swift today, the popular tunes, which honestly, I don't know how I would feel about that. The instrumentation of the time. The treble viol or the violin was the only instrument that was noted in the 1652 publication. And by 1695, the flute, which in fact was the recorder, was mentioned as an appropriate dance instrument as well. Musicologist Jeremy Barlow notes that later publications implied the use of harmonic instruments like the harpsichord, as well as smaller ensembles, even though they weren't explicitly noted in the publications. While we obviously don't have recordings or time machines, it's likely that the music was performed in the stylistic taste of the time, with Baroque ornamentations and melodic variations. And again, in the Playford, there was no harmonic structure or chords given in the music, just the melody line. But for music folks out there, the chord progressions 1, 4, and 5 had already been in place and popularized in music by Playford's time, kind of doing a shift away from the modal sounds of previous centuries, the Mixolydian and Dorian sounds. Historical sources also suggest that improvisation and variations were not only common, but expected in these social dance settings, which if you've been to an English country dance, you know that's something that still rings true today. A side fact, Johann Sebastian Bach, during his time, I think was arguably more known as an organ improviser than he was as a composer. Though we'll never know exactly how early ECD sounded, it's highly probable that those musicians adapted the music both to fit the dance and to express their own musical ideas, something that I think still holds true today. Dun, 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 Sharp's musical influence and role in the revival. Cecil Sharp, a classically trained musician from the mid to upper class, he brought a very specific musical lens to English country dance. His first publication in 1909 included Playford dances and tunes arranged specifically for solo piano. They were very formal settings, stylized in the classical romantic fashion. Cecil Sharp was good friends with Ralph Vaughan Williams, if that gives you a sense of his musical aesthetic. And he had clearly notated harmonies and precise accompaniments. Interesting, in his printed arrangements, in his publications, the preface to the book gives almost no instructions on how to interpret the music, but he notes two very crucial things. One, Cecil Sharp notes to wait until dancers are ready before playing. Two, play as many times through as needed and adjust the tempo to suit the dance. But because Sharp's piano arrangements were the only widely available edition of Playford tunes at that time, they effectively standardized both the repertoire and the sound, the expected way to play it. This classical fixed interpretation, I believe, became the foundation on which much American English country dance music was built upon. Talking and interviewing both Jacqueline Schwab and Karen Axelrod, this book was their introduction to playing English country dance music. Jacqueline Schwab commented about getting this book out of the library and transcribing the sheet music and learning it from there. Unfortunately, we don't have any recordings of Sharp actually playing the piano, but we do have a set of recordings that he supervised in 1916 using the Prince's Band, a full brass ensemble recorded on Columbia Records, that I think was based out of New York City. It's important to note that Sharp was obviously not recreating a historical sound of Playford's era. He wanted to create a more modern, popular style, and this recording that I'll just play for you in a moment, I think was meant for the style of the time and for popularity, and very much not for period authenticity. So I'm going to play you just a couple short snippets of This Is the Black Rag that Cecil Sharp kind of produced and conducted in New York City. And I will look at Katie to make sure that the audio is in fact working. I'll wait for a thumbs up. And before I do it, I do love Graham Christian's comment that he wrote in his Playford Assembly book, that Cecil Sharp was very much not a neutral preserver, but a creative editor. So here's a little bit of the Black Rag. So there you have it. Can you imagine dancing to this? I'd have a hard time keeping a straight face, that's for sure. I'm actually also curious, Cecil Sharp meant for this, was this meant for listening only purposes, or this was meant for dancing as well? I'd be very curious about that, what his intentions were with this recording. Let's do a quick look at just a comparison of the musical notations. Here's another play for dance called Rimstock. On the left-hand side, you have the original 1651 Playford notation. On the right-hand side, you have Cecil Sharp's piano arrangements. And I just want to point out kind of some of the differences in these two. So not only do you have musical notation shifting over time, but some interpretive stuff as well. So on the notation side, I don't know if you can see my cursor. It's not even very visible in the notation, but this was originally printed in the time signature of 6/4, and Cecil Sharp switched it to 6/8. I think in today, if I were to look at a piece in 6/4, I don't know what I would do with myself. So this just kind of reflects the evolving notational conventions. And 6/8 was much more familiar in the 20th century. He also, interestingly enough, transposes the tune from the key of G major to A major. So he went from 1 sharp in the tune to 3 sharps. And at first I was just like, why would he do this? Like, why? Like, there's no reason to shift, transpose it. And then I was like, well, let me see what it sounds like, or let me play it on the fiddle in the key of G. And I'm here to tell you that it is in fact much easier to play in the key of A major than the original G major. More significantly, though, Sharp adds that full harmonic accompaniment, kind of adding in his ideas of chords, particularly in that classical style. He adds bass lines and inner voicings in it. And again, as opposed to Playford's version, which is a simple melody line with the assumptions that you know what to do with that melodic line. Sharp also adds some phrases and some slurs in the music that I think gives us some clues about how he imagined the tune should in fact be played, with more lyrical shaping and articulations and a much more refined character. I'm not much of a piano player, and I'm going to embarrass myself right now, but I'm going to sing you the first line. I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm going to sing you the first line tracing those slur lines that you see. This is very much off the cuff, but I think this might give you an idea of following those lines. So just the first line, he goes, bum 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 ba ba bum ba ba da 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 ba da ba da da ba ba da ba ba da da dum. So he decides where the tune breathes. And so again, just his own aesthetic idea of how this tune should go. I want to indulge myself for a few minutes and play you a lovely version of Grimstock, interpreted by this modern Baroque ensemble called Three Notched Road. And I think they're based out of Virginia. And just give you a sense of this reinterpretation of Playford's Grimstock. Just a couple of tidbits on this. The video is a little bit soft, so you might want to turn your volume up just a little bit and then remember to turn it back down. I got it as loud as I possibly could. I'm also going to start about halfway through the video because there's this sick recorder solo halfway through that just blows my mind. So here we go. This is Three Notched Road doing their interpretation of Playford's Grimstock. they're having so much fun playing that and just brings me so much joy. But another interesting question that I would pose to you is, would you dance to this? Would you dance to a whole evening of period Playford music interpreted in the style that Playford might see it? So after Cecil Sharp's death in 1924, May Gadd stepped into a central leadership role here in the United States. And I just love this picture of her. She is just so happy and full of joy. She was a close collaborator of Sharp's and became the director of CDSS, serving from 1927 to 1972. I don't know about you, but that is a very long time and lots of culture shifts between those time periods. Gadd was deeply committed to preserving Sharp's vision, and much of her work centered on institutionalizing English country dance here in the United States. She taught extensively, traveled across the country, and helped set the national tone for how ECD was to be danced and taught, always with Sharp's aesthetics and standards in mind. I just have to read you this quote that Phil Merrill, who was the music director for a large part of that time, said about May Gadd. And of course, she made a lot of people mad because she was very inelastic. I loved her, but there were times when you wanted to just throw her off the Brooklyn Bridge. I just love that quote. Also, it makes me like want to hang out with Phil Merrill. Side note, you might have heard of the 1932 publication of Maggot Pie, which was the first book of newly written dances post Cecil Sharp. While I can't remember exactly where I learned this or who told me this, I believe that May Gadd prevented this book from being sold in the United States. Despite her conservative orientation, though, I think small innovations did emerge under her leadership. And I want to point out one of those. In 1951, CDSS began releasing recordings of the Playford dances featuring musicians who had been on staff at Pinewoods. Interestingly, these albums experimented with using multiple tunes for a single dance, especially for long ways dances. Gasp. A CDSS newsletter announcing the project notes, in most cases, more than one tune has been used for a dance. The increase in aliveness of the dancers as they hear the musicians go into a new dance is very noticeable. While the idea of having multiple tunes for one dance didn't catch on drastically, these recordings that she produced were pretty forward straight thinking. I mean, I'm trying to think of examples that we have today of change tunes. Leather Lake House. I'm wondering if there are others that people can think of, but that, breaking this rule of having different tunes for a particular dance. Pat Shaw coming to America, another human that I wish that I had a time machine to meet. Although Pat Shaw had already revolutionized English choreography in the UK in the 1950s, his influence didn't reach the US until much, much later. His first and only visit to Pinewoods in 1974 marked a huge turning point in ECD music and choreography. Shaw's charisma and energy and his status as a British choreographer and a musician coming from the country of origin, I think gave American dancers and choreographers permission to innovate more than Cecil Sharp had. In a way, I think he legitimized change by both embodying the continuity by being English, but also reinventing and coming up with new dances. Not only did he take a look at Sharp's interpretations of Playford and argued that some of them were misinterpreted, he composed entirely new dances, with many with original tunes that reflected contemporary music sensibilities. Levi Jackson being kind of the prime example of that, Walpole Cottage, to name just a few. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to locate any known audio of Pat Shaw calling English dance. If you do, please send it my way. That being said, I was in England last year and some British friends played me a delightful and completely unexpected recording of Pat Shaw doing a singing square. It's not an ECD at all, but I'd love to share with you just a couple of seconds of it to give you a sense of his music and his voice and his spirit, and just kind of thinking about that and imagining him as a human at Pinewoods and just getting everyone so excited about these new dances. So I'll go play a little bit of that video.
And On the head, you ladies cross over, and by the gentleman stand. On the side, you ladies cross over, and you all shake hands. Salute the corner lady, and honor your partners all, and swing the corner lady round and promenade the hall. Now the new head ladies cross over.
Modulation.
Modulated, yeah. Side ladies cross over and you shake her hand. Salute the corner lady and honor your partners all. And swing that corner lady round and promenade.
I thought there was an echo for a moment, but that's just me laughing in the video and saying the exact same thing that I just said out loud. I'm very predictable. I think he modulates 3 or 4 times in that recording. And also that's Bruce Rosen's head, in case you were wondering whose head that was. I want to also point out this really wonderful picture in the right of this on this slide, that despite May Gadd's reputation as one of the disciples of Cecil Sharp and prohibiting Pat Shaw from coming over to the United States, this photo here of the two of them together at Pinewoods in 1974 is quite telling. They're at least pretending to like each other. And I want to point out the years is that May Gadd retired executive director in 1972, and Pat Shaw didn't come to the US until 1974, which I don't think was a coincidence. All right, repertoire shift. Dun, 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 dun. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time going through these names, but I wanted to highlight just a handful of influential American choreographers, and just to point out how lucky we are in this country to have such fabulous and prolific composers of music or of dance. I do want to make one key point about the list of these names, and that time and time again, it's been clear to me in doing this research that it's the music that brings on the inspiration for these choreographers, and that the music and the tune comes first and offers the inspiration to create these dances. And I know this is a very short list and I've missed a million names, but just wanted to highlight just a couple of them across the country. A note on reconstructed dances. Reconstructed older dances have never gone away, but I wanted to point out that while there is interest in recovering the steps and choreographic patterns from the past, the same really can't be said for the musical reconstruction. Even for historically based dances, the way that we play them in the US do not follow historical performance practice. And we can't ignore Andrew Shaw, even though he's English, he's had a huge influence and following in the US. He's known for his reconstructed dances, but also willing to adapt and change the tune for modern ears. If you know Rebecca King, an incredible composer and piano player based in the Bay Area or Napa Valley, she has rewritten some of these older tunes or just completely written another tune to go with these older dances. And I particularly love this quote to just kind of point out what reconstruction means within all of this. Any act of reconstruction is by definition an act of creation. Standardization of repertoire. One of the most transformative forces in the standardization of ECD here and repertoire in the US has been the publication of the Barnes books, compiled by the amazing Kate Barnes. Now a 3-volume set known as Barnes 1, 2, and 3, or Blue, Red, and Green. These books have become an essential resource for musicians across the country. When I was first interested in playing for ECD, the very first thing that was told to me is you got to buy these books and learn those tunes. It's just kind of an automatic thing if you're interested in learning how to play. The first volume was published in 1986. That was like 40 years ago. And according to Kate Barnes, she says that an estimated 60 to 70,000 copies have been sold since then. That's like a really big number for a very niche community here. That's amazing. These books have brought a sense of cohesion across the communities, allowing musicians anywhere in the country to speak the same musical language, even if they've never played together before. In asking Kate about her collecting process and how she selected these tunes, she said, I would go through my music of what I had, and if I remembered it, there's a chance that I played it. If I heard it more than once in at least 2 different locations, I thought, well, this tune is probably worth putting in the book. Of course, she would admit that sometimes the tune was just a little bit too good to leave out. And so she would include some of those, even though they hadn't made their rounds in the community yet. So in that way, Barnes books don't just reflect the current repertoire, they also has shaped it. If it's in the Barnes book, there's a higher chance of it being played. Although I have to admit, just recently, I decided to go through these books, and I was surprised at how few tunes I knew, particularly in the first book. So even within that 40-year shift, there's been a drastic change of repertoire. All right, musical innovation. Why? Let's just look at why innovation has happened and not just how. A big part of the story lies, I think, in the social and cultural context here in the United States. First, the tradition evolved during a time when the American cultural values were shifting, especially in the 60s and 70s. These decades emphasized individual creativity, authenticity, and experimentation. And I think that deep ethos deeply shaped the American approach to ECD music. I think musicians felt free to explore more, to improvise, and to personalize the sound in ways that echoed those decades. I also think that unlike in England, ECD in the United States is not or was not tied to a nationalistic revival movement. In the UK, Cecil Sharp's efforts were part of a huge push to specifically identify as English, and folk music and dance was part of that. So again, you think about World War I and all of the tensions and kind of figuring out what your national identity was. And I think with that tie, there came the expectation of historical accuracy or cultural purity in a way that we don't have here in the United States. We just don't carry that baggage. It wasn't rooted in that national identity. And I think ECD is mostly practiced by people who aren't culturally English. I don't go to an English dance so that I can feel more connected to my English roots. And I think because of that, that gives us the freedom to treat ECD more as a canvas and not this sacred artifact. I think a good comparison is with the Irish traditional music scene here in the United States, something that my husband and I are also a part of. I think that Irish immigrants here in the US have clung to their music as kind of a deep expression of their cultural identity because they've been removed from it. And so their need to keep it within this box of what is considered traditional music. But here in the States, ECD is more of a borrowed art form. So again, there's just more room to play with it, reshape it, and just make it into whatever we want it to be. And I think that helps kind of explain why innovation wasn't just allowed in the United States, but I think it was just inevitable for it to happen. I would love to take a moment to do kind of an audio comparison of the dance Trip to Paris. And so we're going to kind of go in our way back machine and start with the 1940s with Elsie Ruby Averill. I think Ruby was her nickname, and pianist Everald de Jersey. And they played for Cecil Sharp. And so Cecil Sharp would have worked with them and kind of taught them the way that he expected English country dance music to sound. So we'll go ahead and start with that. And huge shout out to Mitch Diamond for sending me these recordings. All right, let's take a moment to listen to this. Actually, before I do, I'm going to pose a couple of questions for you to think about while we go through all 3 of these. I'd love for you to think about what are some key differences between these recordings. The instrumentation, the tempo, the introduction, how do we start the tune, and some arrangement ideas. So just have those questions in your mind while we go through these 3 recordings. All right, here we go. Sorry, I got a little excited there. I love that recording, actually. I love the nuance of the piano player, and every time she's doing something different musically. Oh, I'm not supposed to give you answers. This is supposed to be an act for you to think about this. I'll keep my mouth shut. All right, this is the Pinewoods Players. These are the recordings that May Gadd helped produce. So they were the Pinewood Players and produced or directed with Phil Merrill at the helm. And then Phil Merrill's the one playing the piano. So here we go, Trip to Paris. And I think this is the mid 1960s. Right. And so last, but certainly not least, this is Bare Necessities playing Trip to Paris in 1999. This one's a little bit louder. I'm going to see, I think I turned it down. So let's go ahead and take a listen to this one. Well, didn't mean to cut it off. Sorry about that. I was going to wait for that last turn. But I kind of foreshadowed the next slide. So we'll just move on to the next slide. Actually, real quickly, I just want to talk about these. The tempo shift, the first recording is so much faster. Can you imagine dancing to that tempo? And something that I just love of the second recording is these intricate arrangements, and there's something new happening, but very busy. Everything's happening at different times. And I just, yeah, this stacking that I think I can't imagine that this wasn't pre-written out with these arrangements. I mean, they're just so intricate that I think that I can imagine them with sheet music knowing exactly what to do. And then the last one with Bare Necessities, the breadth and the space and the amount of change through each time through the dance. So that leads me to Bare Necessities. If you are in any way part of the ECD dance community, you know the musical group Bare Necessities and how important they are in shaping English country dance music in the United States. This wasn't just about one amazing band. I think it was about this perfect storm of all of the right people in the right place and the right moment in time. So first, the Boston folk scene in the late 1970s and the early 80s was incredibly vibrant. This was the time also that contra dance in Boston was equally getting the revival. There was this culture of collaboration, experimentation, and clearly like heightened musical excellence. And I think a huge credit goes out to Helena Cornelius, who ran the Wednesday night English dance in Arlington, which is still around and thriving. She actively encouraged new repertoire and new ways of playing, and Bare Necessities was the house band during that time. And she would give them space and not tell them directly how to play it. Kate Barnes would tell a story about she'd have this binder full of music and she would just kind of shuffle through it and take a piece of paper out and say, let's try this one, and hand it to the band to sight read. And of course, there's the musicians themselves. Each one of them brought a distinct musical background, thinking about Mary Lee's tango influence, Jacqueline Schwab's romantic style, but also she studied medieval and Renaissance music at New England Conservatory, and Kate Barnes' incredible idea generator and influence of the contra dance world, because Kate Barnes was also heavily influenced in the contra dance world in Boston. So all of their differences, I think they leaned into them and that tension and the exchange of ideas and style. And I think it pushed the group in ways that they would not have gone alone. So if they all had the same musical identity, I don't think that we would have gotten the band that we did. And I think whether it was intentional or not, I think they challenged each other musically, and a result created something completely new, something expressive, responsive, and very much dancer-centered. Jacqueline Schwab was also a caller during that time. And their sound redefined the genre. You can hear that huge difference between Phil Merrill and Bare Necessities. And I think they really set the new standard for English country dance music and what it could be like here in the United States. And I love this quote from Jacqueline. She said, "We weren't trying to play historically accurate versions. We were trying to create something expressive, something that felt alive under the dancers' feet," which I think really embodies the attitude and musicality of Bare Necessities. I don't know if this is the proper way of defining it, but I like to call it the Bare Necessities effect. One of the most powerful things that Jacqueline also said to me was that we were never trying to be the standard. We were just trying to make something beautiful. But of course, whether or not they meant to, I think they did become the standard. Their approach to the music, again, that interactive expressiveness and responding to the dancers on the floor, I think has become a default model for how English country dance music is played today. And I think there came some unintended consequences to that. I think because Bare Necessities was so influential, many musicians started to emulate their sound or their sound to it. I remember when I was first starting that there was this expectation to recreate particular recordings of Bare Necessities. I think they have 18 records, and there's a lot of communities out here that don't have live music, and they use those recordings. And so through those recordings, I think that also influenced how we perceive and interpret music. And I think and I think some musicians also have kind of gone against it. So whether or not they were trying to emulate it, I think people said, okay, there's this thing, what can we do to sound different? One thing though that I really love that I think that we're all hold together as ECD musicians is their kind of groove-based arrangements, and kind of that introduction also to that rhythmic drive to a lot of music. So today, whether or not musicians are building on what Bare Necessities created or trying to forge new paths, I think Bare Necessities' influence is still the ground that we're all walking, even after all of these years. And here's just a picture of some very lovely musicians that play for English country dance. And I think that this represents kind of the diversity that we have today. I look at Anna Patton and her jazz influence that she has, and Shira Kamen here, who has a background in medieval music, and Rachel Bell, who has a bal folk French background, and Dave Weisler, who can play literally anything he wants. I wanted to also kind of talk to you about kind of like what goes in the mind of a musician while we're playing for English country dance. This idea, this graph right here, and I think it was coined by Bare Necessities. In the folk world, we like to call it a passion graph. And you see the y-axis is the passion that we're playing, and then the x-axis of time. And so we have this map, or we create this map as the dancers are coming along. And we want to vary every time that we're playing a dance. And we want to create a movie. We want to create a scene. And we're adjusting it real time based on how the dancers in the room feels. And kind of the way that we change the passion can be texture, density, dynamics. The list goes on about all the different ways that we can do that. There's always something happening different every time that we play through the round. We've got one tune to play around with. And so our goal is to make that interesting for the dancers throughout that time. So I'd love to play you one of my favorite videos of English Week at Pinewoods. Hint, registration is now open, and rumor has it there's a couple of slots still available for English Week. And this is, I think this is The Rag with Joanna Reiner calling, and the band is myself, Ben Schreiber, and Karen Axelrod on one of the evenings. And so let's just take a listen to a few minutes of it. And again, kind of think about what that passion graph is that we're creating and what are the methods we're doing musically in order to do that. And then watching the dancers as they react to the music and how we're reacting to the music as well. So let's go ahead and take a listen. Oops. I'll skip a little bit to the start of it.
Twos turn once and a half. Star right. Star left. Partners set twice. What comes next is 3 quick changes.
Ruby, that's not how
Here,
this goes.
partner, neighbor, partner, one's cross. Turn once and a half. Two's the same. Stars. Set twice. 3 changes. One's cross now.
Okay, I could listen to this video forever, so
Twos.
but I promise it's available on YouTube. And it's just, it brings me so much joy and brings me back to that evening and just the joy of the dancers. And it wasn't too hot, like the weather was perfect. And it was just one of those magical moments. All right. Oh, the downside of innovation. Oh, what a bummer. I just wanted to pose this question to all of you, and just something that I want us to be aware of with this constant repertoire shift. I just want to ask ourselves, are we favoring the latest and greatest new dance and the novelty over it, over the quality, or these older dances? Have we lost any older dances because of all of these new dances? Do we feel the pressure to play or to teach these new dances? And has the definition of what is ECD music gone too far? That's a bold question to pose, but just something to think about. I think about these outlier dances. I think about Tango in Toronto or Smithy Hill and how we dance it and how we play it. You can thank Mary Lee and Bill Tomchek for that interpretation, by the way, or the way that we've decided to dance and play Softly Good Thomas, a reconstructed, very, very old dance. I don't think that's how Andrew Shaw intended that dance to be danced, as much fun as it is. I just want to read this quick quote from Genevieve Scheimer, who was a dancer and organizer in the Boston area. We should be flexible yet discriminating, not accepting change for the sake of change, but with an awareness of what we were doing. So just something to think about as you look at your programming or you're looking at the dance and saying, are all of these new dances, or what have we missed because of that? All right, just to kind of finish up, a question that any master's degree student likes to ask themselves: why does any of this matter? Why did I spend all of this time doing this? And I'm here to tell you that it does matter. English country dance music is a living tradition. It's easy to think of ECD as this is historical, but what we've seen is that it's still evolving and will continue to do so. The way that we play, teach, compose, and dance to this music reflects our modern values, our musical sensibilities, and I think our social priorities. And I think the shift of gender-free calling is a prime example of this. Innovation isn't a break from tradition, but very much a part of it. I feel that very, very strongly. From Playford's adaptations of popular tunes to Sharp's classical piano settings, and now to these groove-driven cross-genre arrangements that we're doing as musicians, innovation has always been a part of ECD's DNA. What looks like change to us is often just a continuation of the creative engagement that we have with our tradition. I think musicians also shape how we dance. The sound of ECD is not just the backdrop. I think the music is a core element of why we dance. It actively affects how dancers move and feel. Had Bill Tomchek and Mary Lee not done Smithy Hill the way that they played it, we wouldn't be dancing it the way that we do now. And I think the musicians are the mood setters and co-creators in this whole process. Understanding how and why the music sounds the way it does, I think gives us insight about the tradition and how it's sustaining itself. Another thing is that standardization of the ECD repertoire, I think, is both useful and sometimes can be limiting. Resources like the Barnes books, like thank God they're there, and the recordings has helped unify our repertoire. But I think they've also kind of created an expectation that can limit some musical exploration. I think just acknowledging that this tension exists in the tradition, I think will keep us more flexible and just being aware of it. I think the future of ECD depends on our creative freedom. If we want this tradition to survive and more importantly to thrive, I think we need to make space or continue to make space for new voices and new compositions and new interpretations. And I think that might mean like supporting musicians who take risks and valuing diverse musical lineage, and kind of resisting the way of like, oh, this is the way that we've always done it, or this is the right way to do it. Finally, and most important, this music matters because it brings people together. At its core, English country dance music is social. It invites the connection, invites dancers and musicians, callers and communities to all come together to participate in this beautiful thing. And I think the music's evolution reflects the collective creativity of everyone who participates in it. We've come to the conclusion. And I just want to end with someone who can word it much better than I can. And again, the Genevieve Schreiber, quoted from a CDSS News in 1975. She said, "The very word tradition has the ring of something solid and unchanging. Yet a living folk tradition is continually undergoing modifications because it is subject to influences and changes imposed upon it by the succeeding generations of folk. Sometimes these changes are slight, occasionally they are dramatic, but a deep-rooted tradition can survive almost any onslaught and still remain a vital part of the folk community." So there you have it. Thank you for taking this time in this crazy world that we live in and spend an hour with me. And again, I want to thank everyone who I interviewed for this paper and to the older generations for sharing their knowledge and just absolute love for the art form. It's just so clear to talking to everyone how deeply important ECD is to them. And again, I want to thank CDSS and anyone who has donated anything to the organization, money, time, or otherwise. I am an extremely proud employee of CDSS and very fortunate to be part of the committee. So thank you again, everyone, for being here tonight.
Thank you, Audrey. This is so good. I kind of want to hear all the words or read all the words, but not tonight. You deserve a break. Great. So I captured a few questions along the way. While you're thinking about other questions or comments you want to make, I want to tell you about some exciting things going on at CDSS. So if you're a member or a donor, you're supporting programming like tonight's programming. We also have another online program coming up on Tuesday. We're launching, sharing with everybody a new archiving toolkit for groups that want to start archiving their history, their stories. It's a great, this is just a program to talk about the toolkit, and there will be more opportunities to work with the creators down the road. We also are running a regular series, Contra Callers Corner, and that's been a popular new program hosted by Seth Tepfer, who's on here tonight. Next slide. What I really want to talk about, actually, we go to the next one and then we can come back to this one because this is the one that is most relevant for tonight's program. Joanna Reiner Wilkinson and Dave Wiesler and I have been working together to create a really special opportunity this year for English country dance musicians and leaders. It's kind of a more advanced callers and leadership course and a masterclass for English country dance musicians. They are designed to work together. They're going to be collaborative and talking about how the music informs the dancing and how the callers and the musicians work together to really create that magic that Audrey was referring to. So it's a really special opportunity. If you have musicians in your life, if you are a musician, please come check it out. I'll drop a link in the comments in a moment. And then if you go back a slide, the other cool thing we're doing this year, there's a community contra lab initiative happening at Cavell, Dance Music and Spice at Cavell. So it's, again, the same idea, but 3 intensive courses: sound operators, contra dance musicians, and contra dance callers. There will be individual learning, but there will be cross-intensive learning and talking about how to work together to really put on a solid dance. So yes, it's geared to contra dance crowd, but if you have sound techs or musicians or others that you think would be interested, we would love for you to point them that way. Yeah, so I think those are the big things I wanted to draw your attention to. Let's talk about some questions that have come up. There were 2 that I saw earlier. One early on was, so we noticed that the Black Rag recording was playing a song that most of us know as the Black Nag. What are our thoughts on why it was called the Rag, or do you know anything about that? Is it just trying to be cool at the times, or?
Did I just do a typo? It could be something as simple as Audrey did a typo. So I'm going to hold that thought before I put my foot in my mouth.
Great. Fair. I love that you're human. Okay. The next question I have, how would you say ECD music changed in England, if it has at all? What's going on in England?
That's a really good question. I've played English country dance a couple of times in England, and the same person, Gareth Kidder, came up to me after I played for an ECD, and he says, "Well, I've never heard it played like that." And I decided to take that as a compliment on that fact. But another antidote is talking to Joanna about her calling in England, and she said the first time that she called English over there, the band that she was given was 2 accordions and a drum kit. And so I think the musical aesthetic is slightly different over there. And again, I'm just wondering if it's because it just takes longer for the musicality to shift because they feel attached to the way that it's supposed to be done. And this is like my next big project that I'd love to do, is really do a big comparison of not only the music, but the choreography of ECD here versus in the UK. And while there are lots of incredible UK choreographers, I think it's just so much more prolific here in the States. And same thing goes with the music. And I think I would also argue that there are more young people dancing English here in the United States than in England, if that kind of gives you a sense of how it's doing over there. Well, Katie looks really good talking to me with the microphone muted. We can both be human.
We should have bingo cards for this. Okay. One question that came before the program, and I'm not sure if the person is here or not, but how do you talk to classical musicians about what English country dance music is? Because I know a lot of communities have musicians in their, in their town that maybe would play for them, but it's not, there is some difference in how you approach classical music, how you express things in classical music versus how you do that in the English country dance world.
Another great question. And I have a couple of thoughts on that. One, there's this idea that folk music is only an oral tradition and can't read music. And I actually disagree with that. I mean, I think that we can be unique and authentic with our own musicality with having the sheet music. So there's that one thought, but there's this stereotype of classical musicians of they can only read what's on the sheet music. And kind of the thing that we tell classical musicians who are first getting into this is that it's just the guide. Same thing with the Playford musical notation, right? That it's literally just a guideline for you to decide what you want to express musically and what works for the dancers as well. The other thing, and one of my favorite things about playing for English country dance, is the obsessive paying attention to the musicians around you. And I think that this happens in classical music, but not to the effect that I think that happens in English country dance. If I have the piano player sitting next to me, all of a sudden goes high tinkly, I'm going to follow that. My ear does this big prick, and I will immediately jump onto what they're doing. It's that like we talk about, like in the comedy world, the comedy improv, it's the yes and effect. And so you have a musician that does something and you want to latch onto them and you want to blend with them.
Yeah.
And so it's that constant having your radar open to the musicians, the callers, and the dancers and reacting to that. And I think that's something that doesn't necessarily happen in the classical world. So playing with people who are used to adapting pretty quickly to the musicians around you, I think is really important, and something that is not taught as much, I think, in the classical world.
Yeah. Another thing that I've heard too, or experienced even, is classical musicians expressing themselves through varying the tempo, which is a little hard when you're a dancer to deal with.
There are certain guidelines that we have to have for English country dance, and following the tempo is one of them.
Yeah. Play with the dynamics, play with the texture, but don't mess with the tempo.
I mean, ultimately, we are here to serve the dancers. If it doesn't work for the dance, no matter how musical and profound I feel like I'm being, if the dancers can't hear the beat or can't dance to it, you have to drop it immediately.
Yeah. I know I'm sure a lot of us have felt like dancers, we can feel when that give and take and that chemistry is alive on the band. Like it is so exciting to when that's really clicking, which is kind of why I really wanted Dave to do the thing he's doing this summer, was to help more musicians, because it's good. It's exciting for the musicians. And it's exciting for the dancers. Let's see, we have another question. How much diversity in style have you come across around the US? Like, for example, someone's local dance seems to be a little bit behind some of the newer trends, or have a different style. So yeah, what have you been experiencing? What diversity and differences?
So I think my answer is very influenced on the fact that I see Anita Anderson like 2 windows next to me, who's an incredible piano player based in the Pacific Northwest. And that's a really good question. And the Pacific Northwest has a really strong ECD community. And Brooke Friendly and Chris Agate are based in that area. So I think the repertoire is might lean a little bit more heavily to those dances than, say, in New England. And this is, I hope, Anita, I'm not just outing you, but I love this anecdote of, so you know the dance Bonnie Cuckoo, right? And we dance it to She Begs She More. Da 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 dee dum da dee da dee da dum. And the Pacific Northwest musicians decided that they did not want to play that tune. So collectively decided to pick another tune to dance to that. And so they dance it, I believe, is it Leona Tuttle's, Anita, that you play, which is a gorgeous waltz that I think continues to serve the dance. And so that's just a small example about those differences. But I think the question about the regional differences also comes true with, you have outside visiting musicians, and that we don't really, outside of camp season, we don't really have a lot of we don't have ways for musicians to learn how to play English country dance, or standardized ways of learning. And so you might come, I know New York City actually has a program to learn, but I think they happen a lot more informal. And so again, Anita, sorry, I'm looking at you, but I think about you as such a beautiful example of taking these younger musicians under their wings and teaching them how to play for ECD. And I think it just depends on what's available and the local community. The way that Dave Weisler learned how to play in DC was that you always got paired with a musician who was better than you. So you had the lead musician and then those up and coming ones. And so you were always kind of learning in that way. So having those things in place in your local community, I think really makes a difference about those regional differences. And of course, the choreographers and who lives in your area, who goes to balls and collects the ball dances and bring them back to their community, who goes to Pinewoods and learns the latest, greatest dances, or excited about Andrew Shaw reconstructions. I think all of those things make a difference about what happens in your regional community.
That's great. It's a good time to plug that we also have funding to support dance research and reconstruction. So if any of you get interested in that, or you know someone working on that and they could use a little extra support, have them reach out to CDSS, because yeah, it's the wave of energy that comes with a rediscovered dance is pretty exciting to to be a part of and then to watch it ripple across the country.
I'll say just two seconds on this, and I'm also staring at Brad Foster, who has been such a huge influence on this paper and has gotten me so excited about it. And Brad Foster is ran an incredible summer camp or summer week called New London Assembly, not in New London, Connecticut, but has Andrew Shaw come over every summer. And one of the most exciting and interesting classes was that Andrew Shaw would go through the process of reconstructing a dance. He would take a script or take the line of a dance and say, okay, what does this say? Well, we don't actually know what this says. How do we interpret it? And so he would go through the process of use like his brain and how one would go through reinterpreting it. And it became very clear and evident that like there is a lot of creative process in that. And you're kind of making things up because we don't actually know what this particular thing said, or this really doesn't feel good in the body. What happens if we try to alter it a little bit this way? And that feels good. There, all of a sudden, we've got this new reconstructed dance that pays homage to the original dance by and certainly has, is very different from the original intent.
I was wondering, I think a lot about the impact that Pat Shaw had, in talking with, Brad and other folks, just hearing that for me, Pat Shaw has been one of those old guys, that did things a while back and we danced the dances and those dances are kind of the old dances because they've been around a while. But thinking about the impact Pat Shaw had when he came to Pinewoods and brought this new wave of choreography and hey, we can create our own thing. We can write dances within the genre. It's Play-Doh to play with if we give ourselves permission. And then thinking about all of the additional choreography that followed in the decades after that, it's really kind of it's incredible to think about the impact that individual people can have. And even if they're having impacts in different directions, it's still affecting all of us and it affects everything that comes afterwards. So I'm so glad that was a part of your research and you talked about that.
Just looking through all of the folks that are here, and I'm just in awe of all of our different backgrounds and histories with English country music and how much it's affected us. And and for a lot of folks here, it's been part of your life, for a very, very long time. So I feel very honored that you're all here to listen to this, and that I hope to continue learning from the community and continue archiving these stories and the history of the evolution of how it's progressed. And I think that we are doing that, but I encourage us in our own local communities to find out about these little tidbits of why do we do it this way, and kind of ask those questions within your own local community, not just the national organization.
Yeah, that Paul Ross just asked what communities are doing musician training workshops now. I think there's always room for national level programming. Obviously, I'm biased. But I think the really getting a pipeline going in local levels is going to be key to training up the next generation of musicians. So yeah, any of you have that going on in your communities now?
We need musicians. So first we need musicians, then we have training.
Fair.
But I am very curious, and I think about all of the unofficial trainings that happen. Again, Anita Anderson with a bunch of younger musicians in the Pacific Northwest. So I'm curious about the unofficial ones that are happening. And then I would love to see more of this happening. Because I think, again, we just have the camps that we can have these intensives, but that's not necessarily accessible to everyone across the country. And so I think it does take our local communities and kind of sort of efforts to make those happen.
Great. Yeah. Any other comments or questions for Audrey while we've got her? This is like we're just so blown away. Like our minds are reeling with the inspiration and thoughts. I am so grateful for people like you who are interested and have chosen to spend time and effort and energy in this thing that I love. I think this is that we all love. I think it's a very special and beautiful and unique living tradition, and it will be fascinating to see where it goes next. I think it's kind of hard to predict what's going to happen next with English country dancing, and I like that. And change is scary, but it's fascinating. All right. I think that we are coming to a natural end to the program. So if you have more questions or ideas for Audrey, you can send them to her at audrey@cdss.org.
Please, I'm excited to read all of the chat. I'm sorry I haven't had a chance to look it up, but I'm very excited to read all of what you have to share. And please reach out to me. Any information that you'd love to share, I would love to hear it. So please do share that with me.
Great. All right. So with that, I will say good night, everybody. Sending love. Great to see your faces. Thank you for joining us, and hope to see you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.